Welcome, Prabhus, to our seminar, Srila Prabhupada, our Founder-Acarya, celebrating Srila Prabhupada's preeminent position in ISKCON, as well as every follower's foundational relationship with him. First, we'd like to show you a brief overview of the seminar. There's Srila Prabhupada in a famous Founder-Acarya photo. It was taken in 1967 early, before his first followers even were aware of the phrase Founder-Acarya. His New York followers were feeling lonely for him because he was in San Francisco, and they asked, "What should we do? We feel lost without you." And Prabhupada wrote back, "Well, just follow my instructions, hold classes, perform some kirtan, chant Hare Krishna, and you can put my picture on my seat." So they said, "But we don't have a picture of you." So then Swamiji, as they called him at the time, had a new recruit in San Francisco named Roger, who later became Guru Das, take many photos, and this was one of them. So in our seminar, first of all, we'll have a Sambandha section. We're going to be following the classic Vedantic progression from Sambandha to Abhideya to Prayojana. Sambandha in our context means knowledge of our relationship with Srila Prabhupada, and that will be lessons 1 through 3. Today's lesson we call the Spiritual Masters. Lesson 2, the Founder-Acarya, the origin and development of that concept of Founder-Acarya. Lesson 3, how our Srila Prabhupada fulfilled that Founder-Acarya role like no one ever has. The Abhideya section means once we've understood more deeply Prabhupada's relationship with all of us, all generations of his followers, as our Founder-Acarya, then we're prepared to commit more to his mission. So Abhideya is very mission-oriented. Lesson 4, his mission's roots, from the moment he met his spiritual master to the moment he stepped on the Jaladuta. It's all pre-Western preaching history. Lesson 5, how Prabhupada's planned mission exploded onto the world stage as ISKCON, his ISKCON branch, ending up at the great unfulfilled phase of the mission, Varnashram, which is lesson 6. We'll look at his Varnashram challenge, why it still remains a challenge, why and what to do about that challenge, how to meet it. And then finally we end up with how to find our own individual mission within his mission. So that's Abhideya. And once we commit more to Srila Prabhupada's mission, then we can talk about how to deepen our love for Srila Prabhupada, which is Prayojana. Lesson 8, to love is to cooperate, and we'll discover that Prabhupada said that not only at the end of his life, but he was saying it all the time, at the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's kind of like the Mahavakya, his great utterance for all of his followers. Before the last lesson, lesson 9, we look at fictional Prabhupads. In other words, misconceptions about Srila Prabhupada, both impersonal and sentimental. And once we dispel those, then we can enter into the final lesson, an authentic individual relationship with Srila Prabhupada. We call it your Srila Prabhupada. That's the overview. Now, lesson 1, the Spiritual Masters. In this lesson, we'll look at the oneness and the difference of God and Guru, as well as the oneness and difference of gurus. So there in the image is Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, the author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it was from his famous biography of Lord Chaitanya that I took the title for the first lesson. As you may recall, the first chapter of his whole work is called The Spiritual Masters. Let's take a look at a quote here on the slide. Yes, this is the very first verse of the whole Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Quote, I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual masters. Just before that quote, in his introduction, Srila Prabhupada wrote, he, Kaviraj Goswami, uses the plural here to indicate the disciplic succession. He offers obeisances not to his spiritual master alone, but to the whole parampara, the chain of disciplic succession, beginning with Lord Krishna himself. So, to understand Srila Prabhupada's position as our Founder-Acarya, let's first look briefly at Srila Prabhupada's presentation of the spiritual masters, of the guru principle, and the person guru. There, Srila Prabhupada at New Vrindavan, 1972, addressing Medidavasa Puja Day, and he's describing the meaning of Vyasa Puja. Let's take a look at different levels of meaning of the word guru. First of all, popularly. This is how the word has passed into our language, the Sanskrit word guru. When we hear it in the media, for example, it's very often used to describe a person who has knowledge or expertise. In a word, an expert. For example, people talk about having a sports guru, or a relationship guru, or a political guru, or a financial guru. I was at the post office not long ago, and the clerk said, Mr. Hall, your transaction here is a little complicated. To complete it, I'm going to have to call my postal guru at the main office. So, an expert. That's probably the most secular form of the phrase, of the word. A step up from that, naturally, think of gurus in nature. Think, for example, of in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, how the Avanti Brahmana was describing how he had so many gurus in nature. He identified 24 gurus. And when we say the Shikshastic prayers by Lord Chaitanya, we say Turor api or Turor iva sahishnuna, how we have to be more tolerant than a tree to chant the holy name. So there's so much we can learn from nature. Nature, kind of guru. And then literally, we know, Srila Prabhupada told us, that the word guru means one who is heavy with knowledge. Not simply overweight, but he's heavy, he's full of knowledge. Now, in the next slide, we're going to hear how Prabhupada perfectly defined guru, how Prabhupada brought the word guru to its perfect point. Okay, here we go.
Standard knowledge is received from the Parampara system, disciplic succession. Therefore, it is said, Srotriyam. Srotriyam means who has heard from the Parampara system. Srotriyam, and the result is Brahmanishtam. He is firmly fixed up in the service of the Supreme Personality of God.
Yes, Prabhupada would quote this verse a lot from the Upanishads, describing what a real guru is. He's heard from the right source, and he's practicing Shrotriya. And Brahmanishtam, he's fixed, he's living, he's, as we say, he's walking his talk. He's practicing what he preaches. Well and good, but one may ask, after hearing what a guru ultimately is, why do we need a guru? Even if we know what a guru is, do we know why we need a guru? There, of course, is Krishna instructing Arjuna in the famous surrender verse, where Arjuna says, I'm confused, please instruct me. And in his purport to that verse, chapter 2, text 7 of the Gita, Prabhupada writes, by nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. In every step there is perplexity, and therefore it behooves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. Think about it. To learn almost anything, we need a teacher. Even to tie our shoes, our mother has to show us. Yet, ironically, when it comes to understanding the absolute truth, studying the highest science, what Krishna calls the spiritual science of the self, we often naively think that we can do it ourselves. That's simply not the case. Now, once we understand why we need a guru, it's important that we connect with a genuine guru to whom we can surrender. In one sense, of course, all genuine gurus are the same. So let's look at how that's true. How is the guru one? Here's a quote from one of the compilation books compiled from Prabhupada's spoken and written word. It's called Science of Self-Realization. Prabhupada explains, quote, the guru is one because he comes in disciplic succession. What Vyasadeva and Krishna taught 5,000 years ago is also being taught now. There is no difference between the two instructions. Although hundreds and thousands of acharyas have come and gone, the message is one. So all genuine gurus are one because they deliver the same message in disciplic succession, going back to Krishna. As we'll see later in the seminar, Srila Prabhupada, he was inviting everyone to realize God and become a guru and join the parampara, join the distribution of Krishna's message according to our individual capacity. Here's a preview, a sample of Prabhupada's invitation. This is from a Bhagavad Gita lecture on the 17th of August, 1966, when people scarcely understood what Prabhupada was talking about. Here's the quote. People at the modern age, they are lacking this knowledge. So we require hundreds and thousands of spiritual masters who have understood this Krishna science. Therefore, we have formed this society, and we invite all sincere souls to take part in the society and become a spiritual master and preach this science all over the world. Hundreds and thousands. There's one quote where Prabhupada says, we want 10 million gurus. Not to replace or imitate him as the Founder-Acarya, but to carry on the message of the parampara. So all genuine spiritual masters, as representatives of Krishna, are one in message, but they also differ. So now let's take a look at how gurus differ. How is the guru different? One way that gurus differ is by the role they play in our lives. Here's a quote from one of Prabhupada's purports to that spiritual masters chapter. By the way, if you're curious about what's called Guru Tattva, or the truth of the spiritual master, this chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, especially from, say, verses 32 through 63 of that very first chapter, of the CC called The Spiritual Masters, text 32 through 63. You get a real good primer, a real good overview of Guru Tattva. So here's one way that gurus differ, quote, by role. The initiating and instructing spiritual masters are equal and identical manifestations of Krishna, that's the oneness, although they have different dealings. Okay, different dealings. They play different roles in our life. To understand how those different dealings work, there's a Gaudiya scripture, an allied Gaudiya scripture, written by one of the Gaudiya saints in our line, Srila Narahari Sarkar. He wrote a short book way back in Lord Chaitanya's time. It's called Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita. And there's a lot about Guru Tattva there and Guru-disciple relationships. So in terms of roles, Narahari Sarkar says this, quote, kindly understand this example. Just as one respects one's father as a guru, so the father's older and younger brothers are also similarly respected. But nonetheless, the father is worthy of the most respect. Furthermore, if the father's guru comes, one should double the respect, and he is the spiritual father of the father, or the guru of the guru. He is offered twice the puja or respect. This behavior is recognized as appropriate by all authorities. So the initiating spiritual master is kind of like a parent, and the instructing spiritual masters are kind of like uncles and aunties. So think about that family analogy. In ISKCON's global family, as we just said, initiating gurus are like parents, and instructing gurus are our well-wishing relatives. But their prominence, who becomes prominent in our life, their prominence in our lives depends on the relationships we develop with them. Sometimes, as in ordinary life, we are closer to our parents, and sometimes we are closer to our uncles and aunties. It just depends on how our life goes. But if all are our well-wishers, serving cooperatively in our Founder-Acharya's mission, then harmony prevails. Then there's no conflict. It all depends on that cooperative spirit. Okay, that's one way the Guru is different, by the different roles they play in our lives. Another way the Guru is different is by the different qualifications they have. And what I put on the screen here is an excerpt from an early letter to a disciple in Montreal, Canada, named Janardhan. Prabhupada is explaining two kinds of spiritual masters by qualification. Quote, a person who is liberated Acharya and Guru cannot commit any mistake. But there are persons who are less qualified or not liberated, but still can act as Guru and Acharya by strictly following the disciplic succession. So in this letter, Prabhupada is making it clear that the Guru can come from either the liberated category or the non-liberated. And here's a corroborative reference from one of Prabhupada's purports, because sometimes references in letters don't hold as much weight because they're just given to different people at different times and places for different reasons. But here, Prabhupada, writing broadly in one purport in the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam, he says the same thing. Quote, this Krishna consciousness movement directly receives instructions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead via persons who are, and here's the same phrase as is in the letter, strictly following, notice that phrase, strictly following his instructions. Although a follower may not be a liberated person, if he follows the Supreme Liberated Personality of Godhead, his actions are naturally liberated from the contamination of the material nature. Lord Chaitanya therefore says, quote, by my order you may become a spiritual master. And Prabhupada finishes, he says, one can immediately become a spiritual master by having full faith in the transcendental words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and by strictly following his instructions. So both in the letter and in the purport, strictly following is the qualification to be guru. It's expected that today's student, if the person is really a good student, a student in the true sense of the term, will be tomorrow's teacher. Let's make an observation about that point. We see that in both the letter and purport excerpts, the key qualification to be guru is to be, quote, strictly following Guru and Krishna. Now, one may ask, to be a spiritual master, doesn't one have to be a, quote, pure devotee? Srila Prabhupada answered that on many occasions, and here's one way he answered it. Quote, so pure devotee does not mean that one has to immediately become 100% pure. But if he sticks to the principle that we will follow a pure devotee, then he is as good as a pure devotee. That was from an early 1968 Gita lecture in Los Angeles. So the point, again, liberated or non-liberated, a guru is genuine if he, quote, strictly follows the orders of Guru and Krishna. Even our Founder-Acarya, who of course is on the topmost level of pure devotional service to the Lord, he would set the example by saying, I may not be perfect, but because I'm following the perfect, therefore I am perfect. Prabhupada, he was really concerned that after he left, that things would go on. He wasn't as concerned that people would try to imitate him, although, as you know ISKCON history, that did happen. He was more concerned that we wouldn't step up and in our own regular way act as spiritual masters. Okay, now one more way we're going to point out how gurus differ. They differ by the commitment they make. Here's a quote from CC, Madhya 8, 128 purport. Quote, the spiritual master who first gives information about spiritual life is called the Vartma Pradarshaka Guru. Sometimes you see Pata Pradarshaka Guru. The spiritual master who initiates according to the regulations of the Shastras is called the Diksha Guru. And the spiritual master who gives instructions for elevation is called the Shiksha Guru. Notice the progression here from introducer to initiator to instructor. It really is all about instruction. Whether someone is introducing us or initiating us or instructing us, even if the guru is not opening his or her mouth, the guru is teaching us by example, which is arguably the most powerful instruction. Some would say the only instruction. Yes. So the way it plays out in our lives will be different. Whoever is instructing us the most will naturally become more prominent in our lives. But again, whether introducing, initiating, or instructing, the guru is always teaching, especially by example. Example is better than precept. Actions speak louder than words. Okay. Now, let's look at how all genuine gurus are different expressions of Krishna's mercy. Here's a nice quote. This is from the verse. Kaviraj Goswami is saying, I first offer my respectful obeisances at the lotus feet of my initiating spiritual master and all my instructing spiritual masters. Now, in his purport to that verse, there in the image, of course, is Narada Muni appearing before Srila Vyasadeva to relieve his confusion. which is inconceivable. So in his purport to 135 Adi Lila, Prabhupada writes, quote, a devotee must have only one initiating spiritual master, because in the scriptures, acceptance of more than one is always forbidden. There is no limit, however, to the number of instructing spiritual masters one may accept. And then listen to this last line, very interesting. Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, generally, a spiritual master who constantly instructs a disciple in spiritual science becomes his initiating spiritual master later on. I'll read that again. Generally, a spiritual master who constantly instructs a disciple in spiritual science becomes his initiating spiritual master later on. That's CC Adi 1.35 purport. Now, in this last sentence, Srila Prabhupada is indicating the natural, normative, guru-disciple relationship that is sustainable over time. In other words, historically, this is the way it works. Prabhupada is reminding us that naturally, the one who gives you the most instruction is going to be your initiator. Now, presently in ISKCON, a relatively few number of spiritual masters are initiating dozens, hundreds, thousands, sometimes even tens of thousands of disciples, who often receive more instruction from local senior devotees. To help our guru-disciple culture become more local and sustainable, we need to train and empower, as Prabhupada said, quote, hundreds and thousands of such devotees worldwide to act as local spiritual masters, both initiating and instructing, as Srila Prabhupada has just indicated in that purport. And until that time comes, it's starting to happen. More people are starting to initiate, although I have to say it's much too slow. At least the instruction that people are getting, again, from their local Shiksha gurus, should be harmonious. It should be compatible with what their initiator is telling them. And of course, both should be compatible with the foundational instructions coming from our Founder-Acarya in his spoken and written word. Let's go to the next slide under the heading, All Genuine Gurus are Different Expressions of Krishna's Mercy. Here's a nice quote from Kaviraj Goswami, Adi 147. Quote, one should know the instructing spiritual master to be the personality of Krishna. Lord Krishna manifests himself as the Supersoul and as the greatest devotee of the Lord. And here's an excerpt from Prabhupada's purport to that verse. Quote, there is no difference between the shelter-giving Supreme Lord and the initiating and instructing spiritual masters. If one foolishly discriminates between them, he commits an offense and the discharge of devotional service. The way our history has gone in ISKCON, we very often place more emphasis on the initiator. And that's fine if the initiator is the prominent instructor, but we really do ourselves and the parampara a disservice when we ignore or even marginalize, in some cases, so many qualified Shiksha gurus in our midst. It really, if it takes a village to raise a child, as they say in Africa, we really have to recognize that it does take a sampradaya to raise a sadhaka. It takes many, many mentors to help us go back to Godhead. Now let's take another look at the plurality of gurus. Remember, in the very first verse of CC, in that Spiritual Masters chapter, Kaviraj Goswami said, Vande Gurun, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the spiritual masters. He's saying right in the first two words of the whole CC, that the Guru is one, but the Guru is many too. And this is driven home also nicely by Srila Prabhupada in a rather famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Most of us know this verse, 4th chapter, Transcendental Knowledge, text 34, where Lord Krishna says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. There's the singular highlighted in gold there. First, Krishna speaking of the Guru in singular. And then he continues, inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. So that's the proper combination for transcendental knowledge to be transmitted. Submissive inquiry and service. And then Krishna goes plural. The self-realized souls, plural, can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Now if you go to the Sanskrit, that's the way it reads, upadekshanti. Now reflecting on, who the deliverer is here. Ultimately it is, well, before we go to that, I'll just remark that Krishna starts by referring to the spiritual master as one, as we saw, and then as many, plural. In the word-for-word translation to this verse, the Tadvidhi verse, Prabhupada renders the knowledge impartment verb upadekshanti, you might remember that line, upadekshanti te jnanam, as they will initiate. That's how Prabhupada translates upadekshanti in the word for word. They will initiate. In the whole verse, he says, the self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you. That's how he renders it in the verse. In other words, the essence of initiation, upadekshanti, diksha, is the impartment of transcendental knowledge, indicating that the essence of initiation is really instruction. Again, it's all about shiksha. It's all about the shiksha. Ultimately, it's Krishna, the original instructor, who is delivering us, as he says in the climactic verse of the Gita, not the last verse, but the climactic verse. I will deliver you from all sinful reactions. Now, how does Krishna do that? He does it through all his sampradaya representatives. And therefore we have this famous Padma Purana verse that Prabhupada would quote a lot. Sampradaya vihina ye mantraste nishpala mata. Quote, if one is not actually connected with a bona fide disciplic succession, whatever mantras one chants will not bring the desired result. So, what sustains our sampradayas, our own sampradayas ISKCON branch? Well, Prabhupada gives us a hint in Nectar of Instruction. Quote, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness has been established to facilitate the 6 kinds of loving exchanges between devotees. So this is a good reminder that it's the life, the teachings, the mood, and the mission of our foundational spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, that sustains all our shiksha and diksha relationships over time. Okay, there it is on the screen. Upadekshanti, they will initiate te yu jnanam into knowledge. So the essence of initiation is right in the translation, and right in the word for word, and in the translation they can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. To begin to close the lesson, we're going to look at how Srila Prabhupada introduced the oneness and the difference of God and Guru to his followers. And there's Srila Prabhupada looking at the same time grave, and also maybe you could even say vulnerable, because this photograph was taken even before he had his own place at 26 2nd Avenue. He's posing for a Village Voice photographer in a New York City Bowery loft. The Bowery was the Skid Row. This was the lowest place in New York. And Prabhupada even didn't have his own place. He had to live around with different people. And the person who owned the loft turned out to be a kind of a crazy person that Prabhupada has to get away from. So there's Prabhupada in March 1966, and he's posing, June 66, just before he moved, because when the person who was in charge of the loft went a little crazy on drugs, Prabhupada had to call up one of his serious listeners and ask him if he could help him get his own place, because his situation was untenable. He couldn't really launch anything solid until he had his own place. So there's Prabhupada posing for a rather famous photographer of the day named Fred McDarrah, who was covering a lot of counterculture scenes in New York at the time. So there's Srila Prabhupada. Now, how did Prabhupada introduce the oneness and difference of God and Guru to his first followers? Let's set the scene for you. This is how it appears in the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Quote, on Janmashtami Day, 1966, so this is September 66, Srila Prabhupada announced on the eve of the first initiations, quote, initiation means that the spiritual master accepts the student and agrees to take charge, and the student accepts the spiritual master and agrees to worship him as God. He paused. No one spoke. Any questions? And when there were none, he got up and walked out. Now, that was a real dramatic teaching technique that Prabhupada used. Tomorrow we're going to have initiation. It means the Guru takes charge of the disciple agrees to worship the spiritual master as God. Long, pregnant pause. And then, any questions? But it was such a bomb that Prabhupada dropped that no one had any questions. So Prabhupada just bowed down, got off the dais, walked out the storefront, and back through the courtyard up to his apartment, leaving his first would-be initiates to discuss among themselves what they had just heard. So they were so dumbfounded that finally one of them went upstairs to Prabhupada's apartment. His name was Howard, and Howard asked Swamiji, as they called Prabhupada in those days, does what you told us this morning mean we are supposed to accept the spiritual master to be God? Prabhupada replies, that means he is due the same respect as God, being God's representative. Prabhupada replied calmly, then he is not God. No, Prabhupada said, and here's the punchline, God is God. The spiritual master is his representative. Therefore, he is as good as God because he can deliver God to the sincere disciple. Is that clear? And it was clear, and the devotees went ahead and they got initiated. Of course, they didn't really understand the full import of initiation and what it meant to be a disciple. Prabhupada was following Rupa Goswami and just getting people to fix their mind on Krishna first of all and not even worry so much about rules and regulations and mission, etc. But that's how he introduced the oneness and difference of God and Guru. Okay, that is the spiritual master's lesson, and if I've been clear in my presentation and if you've been attentively listening, we should know by now different uses of the word guru. First of all, from popular to perfect. We should be able to explain why we need a guru. We should be able to know and describe how all authentic gurus are one, but also how they're different. And we should also be able to explain how all genuine gurus are different expressions of Krishna's mercy. And finally, we've taken a look at how Prabhupada introduced the oneness and the difference of God and Guru to his first very novice neophyte followers. There is a preview of the next lesson, the Founder-Acarya, and the transition reads like this. All Vaishnava guru-disciple relationships work under the shelter of the Founder-Acarya, the foundational spiritual master of a disciplic branch. In the next lesson, we'll examine the origin, history, and characteristics of the Founder-Acarya concept with a focus on our Gaudiya Vaishnava line. Thank you very much for listening. We're going to open up the floor now for questions and comments. So, okay.
Suresvara, Prabhu?
Yes. Ramananda Prabhu.
Here's a letter here's a letter from Srila Prabhupada to Satadari.
Hold on just 1 second. You know what I'm going to try and do here is I am going to try and mute Suresvara, because actually I think that's where the most echo is coming from. Try and say something again, Madhukanta.
Haribol?
Yeah, now we're good. Okay. Suresh, I'll unmute you in a moment, okay?
So this is a letter from Srila Prabhupada to Satadari, July 7th, 1974. Yes, a Siksha Guru is anyone who can give spiritual advancement. You take instruction from my books, and if you are unable to understand any portion of the books, then you can get it explained by any senior devotee, whether Madhukanta or anyone else. Any senior devotee can be an instructor in spiritual subject matters. Anyway, I just thought that was somewhat relevant. Haribol.
Thank you for unmuting me, Ramananda. Excellent reference, Madhukanta. That is, maybe you can send me that in email, because that very nicely highlights the fact that of what Srila Prabhupada was hoping. And he was, when Prabhupada would answer letters, he would answer questions, and just as he did to Shatadari Mataji there, he would answer questions. He would more answer the intent of the questioner too, which is interesting. That's why he had different applications, because he would answer the consciousness of the writer as much as he would answer the externals of the question. And then he would always refer the questioner to senior devotees in the temple, and that's where the devotees were in those days, and we were all in the temples. Yeah, he was always referring us to each other, and he was training us to take shelter and to give shelter. And that's how ISKCON is going to go on. As this, nice Sangha with Srila Prabhupada square in the center of all our relationships, of receiving shelter and giving shelter. You'll notice in ISKCON, wherever they have this mentor system, whether it's in Chowpatty or it's in the Ukraine, I'm thinking now of Radhanath Maharaj and Naranjan Swami. That's where it's most developed, as far as I know, although they have it in many places. The mentor system is really a Siksha Guru system. That's what it is. And if it's done right, then Srila Prabhupada is the foundation of it, and they're nourishing one another. And that's why Prabhupada said in that NOI purport that I read, that line, that he created ISKCON to facilitate these 6 loving exchanges. So excellent reference, Madhukanta. And that's how ISKCON is going to go on. Okay. Are there any other questions? We've been on the air for about an hour and a half now, but I'm open.
I had one question, if it's okay with Ramananda Prabhu, that would still go on.
Sure. I'll tell you what, why don't we try and make this like the last question, if that's okay, because that'll end us around, a little bit after 7:30. But please, go ahead.
Right. Suresvara, awesome class, by the way. Thank you very much. It's about the role of the Vasma Pradashika Guru, it seems to me like the person who falls into that category is kind of vague almost. I guess to make it into a question, can a Vasma Pradashika Guru be someone that's not really committed to transcendental knowledge, but because let's say, someone comes to the Hare Krishna temple just because they like the food or they like the kirtan, but they're not really committed to anything, and then they tell someone else this is what's going on there. Can that person be a Vasma Pradashika Guru?
Sure enough. That's why I gave an example of Narendranath Mullik in Prabhupada's own life, because, again, to the best of our knowledge, Narendranath Mullik, or as Prabhupada called him, Naren, he didn't join the mission, but he led his friend Abai to that Alta Ganga rooftop in 1922, summer, to meet Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. And then as they were leaving, Naren, we know this because Prabhupada told us on the recording, Naren said, "What did you think?" And Prabhupada said, "Oh, he's wonderful. I can see now Lord Chaitanya's teachings are in good hands. He can give a real religious idea. Such a nice, saintly person I have met." So, sure, yeah. At least the Vasma Pradashika Guru is on the level of Shraddha. In other words, Shraddha is a kind of an interested, it's a kind of curiosity almost. Shraddha means faith, but it's only faith that this is maybe worth looking at. It's not like Nishtha, where the faith is firm later on, when you're past the dark and ricky.
It just seems to Vasma Pradashika, to put in the word guru into that phrase, it just seems rather generous. It does. I mean, it's kind of odd the way you look at it.
Yeah, but that's Krishna. He's accepting that, and he appreciates that. That's Bhavad Brahi Janardana. That's Krishna, who appreciates how that person is showing him the path, and that person, even if he doesn't go any further than that, is getting a lot of credit, especially if that person.
So a Vasma Pradashika Guru who simply points someone in that direction, even though he's not necessarily committed to that direction, is he performing Sukriti or Agata Sukriti?
Yeah, he's acting. Don't forget, you say generous, but he's generous. He's generous enough to show him the way. It's a preliminary kind of thing, but yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's Krishna. Krishna, he won't interfere with our free will, but boy, is he ever going out of his way to give people chances to accumulate a Gyata Sukriti, as you say. Yeah, unconscious by effect. This is Krishna. He's very. It's sometimes said that in Krishna's reclamation of the fallen soul, it's his greatest lila. Because out of compassion he does it. So here we are, runaways, rebels without a cause. We've willfully chosen to ignore him and try to set ourselves up as independent controllers and enjoyers. And he's very compassionately trying to help us come back. Yeah, so that introducer is a guru, according to the Shastra. Vartva or Pata, Vartva or Darshika, guru, introducer, guru. But yeah. And many devotees have stories like that, where somebody just said, "Hey, check this out," and thought it was worth the person's time to look into it. So, yeah, some kind of credit there.
Suresvara Prabhu, this is Yugala Rasa.
Yugala Rasa, Hare Krishna.
Krishna, my obeisances, Prabhu. No, just wanted to add something to one devotee was considering his dog being Vasma Pradashika Guru, because the dog brought him Bhagavad Gita from the bushes.
That's cute. That is cute.
We can not only learn obedience from a dog, but that fortunate dog, accumulated heaps of Gyata Sukriti by some dog took the Gita in his mouth and brought it to his master.
Right. Yeah. Because on the walk, taking dog for a walk in the forest. And dog.
Well, All glory to the Lord in the heart, who is in the heart of that dog, who told that dog to do that.
Jai.
Krishna is the guru, and sometimes the dog can be the guru too. Why not? All right. Well, thanks for listening, Prabhu. Those who heard the seminar before, you'll notice how it's evolving, and even those who kindly hosted me last week noticed how I'm just following this thing around. It's exciting. It gets better slides, better references, and all glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Haribo.
Wonderful class. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
very
Sureshwar. We'll see you next week.
Jai.
Sureshwar, make time to get together so we can straighten out whatever glitches that were there. Okay?
Okay, thank you. We'll do that on Friday, probably.
Thank you, Prabhu. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.